Probably does. He might be related to me. I got some friends and family.
You got some friends in low places, is that what you're telling us?
They work for BPD and they work for fire. Yep.
Yeah. All right, but we're at the witching hour. So I'd like to call this special meeting of the Lakewood City Council for Monday, February 22nd to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Boki,
Present.
Councilmember Brandstetter,
Here.
Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember Moss,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Whalen,
Present.
and Mayor Anderson.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Tonight's special meeting has one item of business under new business, and it's the rare occurrence where the City Council member of the council due to the vacancy by John Simpson's resignation. It's a weighty burden when you figure that each one of us now represents 10,000 people proportionately. That's a pretty heavy weighted vote. We're fortunate to have a number of really good candidates that have applied, and it's a shame that we can't tap them all for their service to the community. Just as a matter of a quick explanation, we've talked about a process tonight, and this is, unless there's a majority that objects to it, we're going through a process of winnowing down the 15 applicants by voting in rounds. So there will be essentially 4 rounds. In the first round, each member of the council will be able to select 4 names. Out of that round, so there's 24 total votes. The 4 people plus any ties for 4th will advance to the second round, at which time each council member will have 3 votes. 3 people will advance from that round, 3 plus ties, and each council member will have 2 votes. 2 people will advance, plus a tie if that happens, to the final round, in which case an individual will have to receive 4 votes to be selected for appointment to the council. If there is a tie or an inability to reach 4 votes, the council's back to the ad hoc process of nominating, seconding, discussing, and trying to compromise to come out to 4 votes. So also I should mention that there's a random selection process as we go through this as far as which council member goes first. So we don't know the exact order we're going to be voting in any particular round. So without further ado, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll for the first council member to select 4 names?
Absolutely. And as we discussed, I'll share my screen, which will have a list of the candidates there. Councilmember Brandstetter,
Thank you. I would put forward for appointment Mr. Zilker, Miss Ginn, Mr. Brown, and Miss Bell.
thank you. Councilmember Farmer,
I will put forth Miss Ginn, Mr. Zilker, Ms. Bell, and Miss Ottman.
Councilmember Moss,
I will put forward Ms. Ginn, Ms. Bell, Mr. Ryan Zeckler, and Ottoman.
thank you. Deputy Mayor Whalen,
I will put forward Jeff Brown, Ken Whitco, Alan Billingsley, and Rhea Johnson.
Thank you, Councilmember Boki.
And I will put Mr. Billingsley, Mr. Brown, Ms. Bell, and Mr. Whitco.
Thank you, Mayor Anderson.
I will put forward Mr. Brown, Ms. Bell, Mr. Whitco, and Mr. Billingsley.
Thank you. So that brings forward candidates Patty Bell, the total of 5, Jeff Brown with a total of 4, and the ties with 3 votes would be Mr. Billingsley, Ms. Ginn, Mr. Whitco, and Mr. Zippler. So let me just pull those forward and I'll share one more.
Please.
And then how many votes do we get in the second round?
3.
3.
3 and 3 plus ties will advance.
Ms. Jen.
All right.
Oh,
Madam Clerk, are you ready for the next round?
yes, Mayor Anderson.
Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Farmer,
Ms. Bell, Ms. Ginn, and Mr. Zilker.
All right.
thank you. Councilmember Moss.
Madam Clerk, are you ready for the next round?
Yes, Mayor Anderson.
Call the
I
roll,
bring
please.
forward Ms. Jen, Ms. Bell, and Mr. Zirka.
Ms. Bell, Ms. Ginn.
Councilmember Moss, can you please repeat yourself? I was having some audio feedback issues. I apologize.
Sorry, that was Ms.
If everybody could mute when they're not up, it'd help.
I have Ms. Jen, Ms. Bell, and Mr. Zirkle.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Whalen.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, Ms. Bell, and Mr. Whitco.
Thank you. Councilmember Boki. Councilmember Boki.
Unmute. Sorry about that. Was talking to myself. Ms. Bell, Mr. Brown, and Mr. Zilker.
Thank you. Councilmember Brandstetter,
Mr. Zilker, Miss Ginn, Miss Bell.
thank you. Mayor Anderson,
Ms. Bell, Mr. Brown, and Mr. Whitco.
thank you. So we'll just update my sheet real quick here. So that brings forward Patty Bell, Jeff Brown, Kimmy Ginn, and Ryan Zilker. Great.
Are you ready?
Yes, Mayor Anderson.
This is the round where we each have 2 votes. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Moss. I'm sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I have Miss Jen and Miss Bell.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Whalen.
Mr. Brown and Miss Bell.
Thank you. Councilmember Boki.
Ms. Brown, or excuse me, Ms. Bell and Mr. Brown.
Thank you. Councilmember Brandstetter.
Miss Bell, Mr. Zilker.
Thank you. Councilmember Farmer.
Miss Ginn and Miss Bell.
Thank you. And Mayor Anderson.
Mr. Brown and Ms. Bell.
Thank you. That brings candidate Patty Bell and Jeff Brown forward.
All right. Are you prepared, Ms. Schumacher?
Yes, Mayor Anderson.
All right. Each council member will receive 1 vote on this roll call vote. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Deputy Mayor Whalen.
Mr. Brown.
Councilmember Boki.
Ms. Bell,
Councilmember Brandstetter.
Miss Bell,
Councilmember Farmer.
Miss Bell.
Councilmember Moss.
Miss Bell.
And Mayor Anderson.
Ms. Bell.
Ms. Bell has received 5 votes. Mr. Brown has received 1.
So I declare the vote for appointment to the city council to be 5-1 in favor of Ms. Bell. Congratulations to Patty Bell, our newest council member, who will join us for a swearing in next Monday. And maybe we can, Madam Clerk and City Manager, maybe we can actually have a couple of us in the City Council chambers for that. I think it would be more appropriate, social distanced, and see if we can do a hybrid meeting under the current rules, even if it's just myself and somebody to swear her in and the clerk. But I'd like to see if we can do a hybrid meeting to welcome her to the council. So congratulations again to Ms. Bell. Thank you all who have participated in this process through applying and interviewing. I know it's tough to put yourself out there. We've all done that, running for council. And I think virtually everybody here, I think with maybe the exception of Ms. Moss, has lost an election. So it's not the end of public service. So with that, our business is concluded. I would declare this special meeting of Lakewood City Council adjourned. Now I'd like to call to order the Lakewood City Council study session for Monday, February 22nd. The first item of business is a Pierce Transit update. For this, we have Alex Mather from the Pierce Transit and Lindsay Schmel, Principal Planner.
Good evening, Mayor Anderson and Council. You guys switched over quickly there.
We don't mess around.
No kidding. Okay, here we go. I'm going to share my screen.
Just like the buses, we run on time.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, can you guys see all right? Okay. Excellent. So, good evening, Mayor Anderson and members of the council. My name is Alexandra Mather. I am the Government Relations Administrator for Pierce Transit. And tonight I am gathered here with my colleague, Lindsay Schmel, and we're going to give you a quick agency update and talk about what's happening down in Olympia for us. And then we will go into a couple programs regarding service that the agency will be embarking on in 2021. So as anyone in public service knows, when COVID hit, we had no idea how the pandemic was going to impact our budgets, and Pierce Transit was no different. We immediately took drastic measures to ensure the fiscal health of the agency. We furloughed quite a few operators, which coincided with our service reduction, and then we also put a lot of projects on hold. The board, and Mayor Anderson can speak to this as well, the board decided that they would push out passing a budget for 2020 and see how the revenue trends cited. And actually Pierce Transit, with the sales tax numbers being far better than we anticipated, and then we also were the recipients of funds from both of the coronavirus federal packages, the agency was able to pass a budget in February, and we feel very confident in where the fiscal health of the agency is now. So I think another thing that we love to talk about that COVID showed us was the difference between commuter service and local service. I know Lakewood is served by both Sound Transit and Pierce Transit, and so we wanted to talk to you all about the discrepancies we saw. So in April of 2020, when everything stopped, transit ridership on our commuter routes, which is the Sound Transit routes, the ferries, the King County Metro water taxi, Kitsap's ferries, etc. All those bigger commuter routes, their ridership dropped about 90%. And they're still down about 80%. Whereas transit on local service, Pierce Transit, Community, C-Tran down in Vancouver, our ridership dropped 70% in April and then started to gradually come back up. So what that told us was that 30% of our ridership is essential because everything was closed. And the only thing we were allowed to do was to get groceries, go to medical appointments, and get to our essential jobs. So that showed us that 30% of our ridership is essential. It helped us focus and center who the people we really are serving. And we take great pride knowing that we are that lifeline for people accessing the things they need in order to live their daily lives. So, you know, it really is an equity issue. And another cool trend we realized was the Route 1 was by far our most essential route. And we're so excited that that is the next bus rapid transit line, the first bus rapid transit line. And we just, you know, we're taking these lessons forward into the future and figuring out how we can best serve the community with that information. The agency at the end of last year they invested nearly $1 million in a bus rapid transit system expansion study. So what that is going to do, it's going to look at the proposed remaining 4 routes. So we're going to have 5 total, the remaining 4 routes that serve Pierce County. And it's going to inform the order in which we build them, which Lakewood will be a recipient, and also how to electrify those routes. BRT 1 is not going to be electric. It was not the right time, but we do know that we want to see the rest of the BRT routes electrified. So we are partnering with Lakeview City and Light and TPU to ensure that that whole system is executed in a way that is efficient, and also to really be like, there's potential to be a model for transit agencies and utilities. You know, we can be an example of what's possible with a strong partnership. So I'm really excited about that. And that we're going to launch that in June. And I actually think, you know, maybe mid 2022 is when that study should be done. But in the meantime, we can anticipate, because of ridership numbers and other characteristics of Route 2, that will likely be the next BRT line, which I'm happy to say serves Lakewood. It serves Tacoma, Fircrest, UP, and Lakewood. It passes through 3 opportunity zones. You know, it hits centers like TCC, it hits Bates, it touches the Lakewood Town Center. I mean, it's just a really robust line, and we have a lot of hope for it. So down at the legislature, we have been partnering with Pierce County elected officials, and we have worked to ensure that should there be a transportation package, we have a $10 million investment going into the study and electrification needs, et cetera, for the BRT 2, because we know we're about to go into construction later this year for BRT 1, and we want to make sure that we're just feeding the pipeline. We want to get this system built out as soon as possible. So with that, actually, Lindsay, do you want me to cover this, or do you want to cover this slide? This is kind of just a snapshot of the service that Lakewood receives with Pierce Transit. And we, you know, transit, we see a lot of buses, but it really is a 3-pronged stool. You have the shuttle service, you know, which people who are physically unable to ride the fixed route bus, you know, 13, almost 14% of that service for Pierce Transit is serving Lakewood, which is great. You guys are really strong van pool partners. And also, I'm loving that Orca Youth Pass number. So as schools open back up and things come back online with that, we are hopeful to continue that partnership. That's another interesting thing about our ridership. We know 25% of our riders are students. So, you know, we're back up, we're down about 45% now. Students will really help us get to our recovered level of service. So with that, I am going to pass it on to Lindsay.
Thank you, Alexandra.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Lindsay Zamel. I'm a principal planner with Pierce Transit in their scheduling division. We have a few projects and items that we want to talk about in regards to what impacts the city of Lakewood will feel. One of the topics and one of the opportunities that we had a positive out of COVID was we were able to go out and do a complete assessment of all of our bus stops, which equate to about 2,200 bus stops within the Pierce Transit system. And we're looking at doing a balancing project so that we can increase the customer safety throughout the system, help with speed and reliability, as well as a guarantee of efficiency, arriving at your spot when you think that you're going to be there. We are starting our public outreach with these public meetings to the boards and commissions and councils within our PTBA. We will be presenting to our Board of Commissioners in early March, and then the stops that have been identified as a potential for the balancing project will be posted on site at the stop, and there will be a 4-week public outreach period that'll start after our board is presented in March. If at any time you as council members receive phone calls, questions, or inquiries, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Alexander or myself, or Mr. Anderson can make the connections, I'm sure, as well. If there are any questions, concerns, or comments, we're happy to help address those issues for you to assist your constituents. We do intend that any stops that are flagged that do end up being identified for removal through the balancing project during our major service change in September, that's when those stops will be removed. And next slide, please, Alex. The city of Lakewood has really strong ridership. And as you can see, you didn't lose a lot of your riders through the pandemic. The agency, Pierce Transit Agency itself, saw at points in times upwards to 60 to 70% of ridership drops, especially at the beginning phases in the March, April, May area of 2020. Your ridership has stayed fairly stable compared to what we saw in the first few months of the pandemic. And I would assume that we may, as we get past March of 2021 and into April, May, June, I would assume that Lakewood probably has higher ridership numbers than what we saw in 2020, now that we're at this stage in the healing. The city of Lakewood has 8 routes that serve it. That is, 3 of those are our trunk routes, trunk route 2, 3, and 4. And then you have our local service routes 48, 202, 206, 212, and 214. And one of the largest amount of stops within city limits for our jurisdictions that we serve, at almost 300 stops within the city limits. Next slide, please, Alex. So for the March service change, that is our next major improvement. We will be moving, currently we are operating at a 90% pre-COVID service level for our fixed route service. We will be moving to a 95% pre-COVID level as our budget allows, or as our budget has been adopted and does allow. And we focused solely on recovering our Sunday service hours, as when we had to make major service cuts last September, Sundays ended up going in majority for the majority of the local routes at a 2-hour headway, which meant that if you missed that bus, it would be 2 hours until the next one came by. And we heard from our riders that that was very difficult. Sundays, as we all know, are either our day of rest or our day of errands. So route 2 will be back to 100% Sunday service. Route 48 will be back to 60-minute frequencies for the majority of the day. Route 202 will have 60-minute frequencies back at the majority of the day, as well as its PM span increased. Route 206 will be back to 60-minute frequencies the majority of the day, with its span increased as well. And both Route 212 and 214 had 6 restored trips and back to 60-minute frequencies the majority of the day. So we're very happy to see these improvements on Sundays for the city of Lakewood as your constituents work to continue to maneuver around in their daily lives. That concludes our presentation. We are available if there's any questions from the council for the existing service, the plans that Alex and I both spoke about, as well as if the city of Lakewood ever has any questions or interest in talking with Pierce Transit as you move forward in your own municipal planning of infrastructure, land use, and capital investments. We are happy to communicate with you in those realms, as we recognize that we are all a partnership in improving Pierce County. Thank you.
So before I call on Mr. Brandstetter for a question, after 9 years, I have passed the torch of the Lakewood seat on the transit board to Deputy Mayor Whalen. So introduce you to your newest, actually even newer than the new county members, member of the transit board. Mr. Brandstetter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the presentation and the vision for the continuous improvement of the system coming out of the pandemic and moving even beyond what it was before. I had a question about electrification of routes going forward, and specifically you mentioned Route 2. And I'm trying to understand what electrification looks like. Is that electric powered vehicles, or is it infrastructure with wires and things? Just trying to understand what electrification is going to look like in the city.
I am so appreciative of the question. Thank you. So electrification, and it shows me I need to be more specific about this. Electrification is we would be operating electric buses. They would be on bus rapid transit lines. They're articulated buses, so they're the double deck, not double deck, but twice as long. And at the high vision plan right now is like at TCC, at Lakewood Town Center, and at our base. That is where the buses would charge. And so, yeah, electrification, there is the rolling stock piece, which is the bus, but then there's also the charging infrastructure piece and the battery storage piece. I think, working with our utilities, really learning how to be the best stewards of the energy that we are consuming, including like protecting the grid. And so I think battery storage is a big part of this conversation.
And there also needs to be some maintenance infrastructure that isn't presently available, and hiring the people who work on entirely different vehicles. So.
Yes.
Or training.
Yeah. Councilmember, does that answer your question?
That makes things clearer to me. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Any other questions? So I'd like to thank you for coming tonight, and I will leave with my one parting shot. When we look at BRT2, which I've advocated for years, make sure the design at least allows for, if not implements to begin with, extending the line out to JBLM, the largest employer in the South Sound. And although I still am an advocate of Lifeline service first, I think the pandemic and Lakewood's numbers show that that is an essential public service for those who cannot afford or otherwise operate their personal vehicles and need to get to the doctor, need to get their food, or need to get to their job. So that's a very important element for Lakewood, and I want to hope that the emphasis that Pierce Transit's put on that continues. So thank you very much for coming tonight. We know where to find you.
Thank you so much.
We're going to send Mr. Whalen to harass you now.
Thank you, Mayor Anderson.
We'll see you soon, Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you. Send some breadcrumbs so I can find my way.
It's in Lakewood.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Thanks. While we're on the subject of transportation, we now move to an update on the Transportation Benefit District with Assistant City Manager Todd Kraus and Public Works Engineering Director Paul Busich.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Deputy Mayor and Council members. Before I turn it over to Ms. Kraus and Paul Busich, this is a follow-up from the budget this past fall regarding the Transportation Benefit District and specifically the financing mechanism associated with that, the vehicle license fees, which in turn is a follow-up from a council retreat that the council had back in the fall of 2019, where a number of financing scenarios were developed along with some potential project lists on what those dollars could be used for. So between then and now, we have gone through a bit of a refinement. And so this evening, what we have is Ms. Kraus would like to review those financing options and really a focus on the $20 vehicle license fee and our recommendations associated with that, coupled with the projects that it could potentially fund. And Mr. Busich is going to specifically go over those projects and how it works into what I would define as the connectivity of the work that the city has been doing primarily in its main corridors throughout the city. And I'm hoping, like me, it makes sense because I know when Mr. Busich took me through it, it was quite frankly, a bit of a ta-da moment rather than saying, well, why this project and not that project? But again, I don't want to steal his thunder. He's put a lot of work and effort into thinking this out. The other thing I would like to say is that, one of the options that the council has, which would make the rest of this discussion moot, would be whether or not you want to continue to collect the $20 vehicle license fee, since the voters did vote to do away or lower vehicle license fees to what $30 or so. However, that was found to be unconstitutional. That's why our city, along with many, many others, continue to collect the revenue sources. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Kraus, and I'll be here to answer any questions should they arise.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My presentation is pretty brief and City Manager has already given quite a bit of it, so I'll make this even briefer. So just some background information. At the September 2019 retreat, we reviewed 4 potential financing options. Those 4 financing options are included in the packet towards the end of the packet, and there's a lot of information, detailed information, all of which you have seen previously. So in November 2019, the voters approved Initiative 976, and in October 2020, the Washington State Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional. During the 2021 and 2022 biennial budget, we allocated $835,000 from the 2020 estimated TBD $20 VLF fees to the chip seal program of $380,000. We also added $260,000 for minor capital and major maintenance and patching program. And then we swapped out some REIT funding for the TBD. So we spent all of the $835,000 that we had estimated. We also said that we recommended that the City Council review the financing options in February 2021, and that's why we're here today. So the options before you are option 1 is to rescind the $20 vehicle licensing fee. And in your packet, there's some discussion on what is required to rescind the fee. Option 2 was to continue the $20 vehicle licensing fee and continue the pay-as-you-go basis. That's what we're currently doing. Option 3 is our recommendation, and that is to use the $20 vehicle licensing fee to issue $11.3 million in bonds. These bonds would have a life of 20 years. And then option 4 is to increase the $20 vehicle licensing fee to $40. The recommendation is option 3, and that is to use the $20 VLF to issue the $11.3 million in bonds. The bonds, as I said, would be replaced or paid off in 20 years, beginning in 2023. We would leverage these funds with other available VLF fees. So for the 21 and 22 budget, we did not allocate the $835,000 per year. That comes out to about 1.67 million. Plus there was about almost $50,000 in additional VLF fees that we received above and beyond the year-end estimates for 2020. So if we take those monies and add the real estate excise tax of 1.8 million, that brings the total available funding to 14.9 million. So Mr. Busich will be going over the recommended projects, but they would be for projects in the tier 1, which total 14 million, almost 14.5 million. And these would be funded beginning in 2023. They are the Nyanza Road Southwest, Gravelly Lake Drive Southwest to Gravelly Lake Drive Southwest at $4.5 million. 112th Street Southwest, Gravelly Lake Drive to Bridgeport Way for $3 million. 100th Street Southwest, Lakewood Avenue Southwest to South Tacoma Way for $4.2 million. And Silicon Boulevard, Waller Road to 83rd Avenue Southwest for $2.7 million. And the next steps, if the city council were to move forward with issuing bonds, we would take the bond ordinance for you to review in June, as well as adopting it in June. We would prepare the official statements in the March-April time frame in 2023, and then in April or May, do the bond rating and then have the sale in June or July of 2023. That leaves some money available for the JBLM North Access Improvements Phase 2 construction, totaling 4.2 million, would be pursued via the federal DCIP. So with that, if there are no questions, I'd like to turn it over to our Public Works Engineering Director, Paul Busich.
Seeing no questions, I'm going to jump right into it. Good evening, everybody. In the memo that you received, we provided a write-up on the method which we use to identify the projects that we think the council would want to consider for funding with bonding from the Transportation Benefit District. Typically, when you ask a bunch of engineers what projects that they would recommend, the first thing they do is they go to their metrics and they calculate what's the PCI, what's the rating of the road, how much is it costing us to do the road, and what's the average daily traffic loadings, all really good measures. But when we're talking about a large body of work for the community, we recognize that it's not all just about the engineering. It's also about some of the intangibles. Those are listed in your memo, but we think about, well, what projects have the greatest potential for a future grant if we can add more money to the pot when we go after the grant funds, or what projects have a good probability of getting funds from grants based on our history with the grants, so we don't need to necessarily put those forward. What projects do connect the communities? Which ones play well with the council vision for various things like the connectivity, the sidewalk connectivity? So we put together a list of qualitative and quantitative assessment criterion. We did not do all the projects we had on our list because most of them just fall by the wayside because they don't meet one or more of these criterion. We focused on the big projects, the ones that will give us the best bang for the buck. I'm going to show a graphic here in a minute. I'm going to walk you through that. And sometimes the assessment is, well, whose determination is the bang for the buck? And I admit that that's a bit of a subjective one, which is why I would like some input if the council has some additional criteria they want to look at. But we have some information such as what projects right now are waiting to be completed that we've already received grant funds for, that if we don't complete them in time, we're going to have to pay back money. And that's the Silicon Boulevard project. So there's a crucial component of those two projects that we want to bring forward here. Does anybody, before I jump into it any further, do any of the council members want to have me answer any questions on the criterion? Looks like
Mr. Brandstetter.
Mr. Busich, I guess that one thing I was wondering is that back when the Transportation Benefit District was formed, there were there were a number of projects that were put on a list that, while they were prioritized, but that were important, and they were on the list because they were looked at as projects that would be beneficial to the city, but that probably were not going to be competitive under any of the known or foreseeable grant funding competitions, and that was a reason they were looking for. Two that come to mind were the connectivity of the Colonial Center to the west along Mount Tacoma Drive with sidewalks and some improved pavement, which it also is a road that I don't think the pavement index is really great on that road, but it was not one we've gone to do. And another was completing the unfinished Hipkins Road project that goes back to the early decades of the city that still sits there. And the projects, so that and you mentioned that you sort of chose projects of where this money would be matching money for grants, but the district was originally envisioned to go where no grants would go. And it doesn't seem to be a part of the proposal as you outlined it for Tier 1 projects. So did that get considered in your project selection?
To a degree, yes. But what we were looking at was, what's the existing condition of the roadway now? Is it a busy arterial or is it not? And then does it complete a system? And so what I brought up on the screen that I believe you can see is a zoom in on one of the graphics that was presented to you in the packet. You see project number 83, which is Hipkins Road right here. We recognize that project needs to be completed, but it's on the lower tier of projects because it doesn't really complete a system of sidewalks and connectivity. Whereas Silicon Boulevard, those two remaining pieces here to be funded, when Silicon Boulevard is done, you can walk from Far West Drive all the way down and almost get all the way to downtown. To fully complete that, we're also recommending that Ardmore Drive Southwest and these two other side streets here, one or both of them be completed, because now you can use non-motorized means to get from the edge of the city on the west, down Silicon Boulevard, all the way to the downtown core. So that gives you connectivity down to the transit center. It gives you connectivity to the shopping and the services that are available down here in the middle of the community. Also, with the project we're completing on 111th, 112th, which will start shutting down the road here in a couple of weeks, our argument and the reason why we got funding from Sound Transit on this was this completes the non-motorized path, so Sounders, train users, can bicycle and walk all the way into the downtown, the city core, the shopping center and the Pierce Transit. So that piece right through Stillicum here, and then this component here, we would rate higher than Hipkins, which basically brings people down to a disconnected system still. Because you get here, but then you can sort of make it to Idlewild, but then we need this last piece here. So when we're looking at the projects, we're looking about how does it complete systems. So I want to show you on the south end here around Gravy Lake Drive. What's in red here? Veterans Drive, we're completing that now. That's a great project. If you haven't been out there to look at it, I highly encourage you to do so. The other part in red here is Gravy Lake Drive or the JBLM North, phase 2 construction. And this body of work right here will make it easy for people to connect to the Thorn Lane connector and then all the curb gutter sidewalk down on Pack Highway. So it completes the system from basically interlocking, and then the next body of work, which is what we're going to go after DSIP funding right here, the green, that's the other half of the JBLM project. So this project, coupled with what we've already done or completing, is a significant body of work that allows all the residents who live in here to find a non-motorized way to get to downtown, out to Pack Highway, to the high school, and to Sound Transit. To get to Sound Transit, though, they've run into a gap, and that is the 112th Street project, 112th Street. That's another project we're recommending in the top tier. When 112th and then Nyanza is done, this whole southerly region down here on the major corridors will be completed. That means anybody who lives within walking distance can get their bicycles, and they can also walk, and they can get to these shared use paths and these sidewalks, and they can get to the important components of our community without having to get in a car. So that's why JBLM, Nyanza, and 112 are the top 3 projects on our tier. We look at the road condition, we look at what's the anticipated maintenance life from where it is today versus when we think we might be able to get grant funds. We look at opportunities for grant funds where we could leverage some of the TBD bonds with a grant application to get more money to help offset our internal costs to build the project. Another project which is high on our list, which we've been trying to find grant funds for some time, is 100th Street from Lakeview Avenue all the way to South Tacoma Way. For whatever reason, we have not been successful in getting grant funds for it. And yet it's a major component of our work that if it was connected through, everything you see on the blue that connects through, that means that no one's walking on the shoulder. They have a safe path. They have a safe way to get their bicycles and themselves walking to all of the features that we have along Pack Highway, South Tacoma Way, and also the back way into the transit facility here, Pierce Transit. So this connects the system. So when we are looking at these, we are trying to see how these projects connect systems. They complete systems. This area down here on the south side, with these 3 projects, we will have connected a significant amount of the community to safe walking paths, bicycling paths to get to a lot of the amenities of our community. We already know with Veterans Drive, they can get to the VA hospital, they can get to American Lake Park. We expect to see improvements in this area here in the business district. And then with the loop all the way around Gravity Lake, you've heard me speak about that before. People will be able to use that for exercising. At some time in the next 4 or 5 years, DOT is going to build the Thorn Lane connector. So that's going to allow the people who live down in the Woodbrook-Tillicum area to safely get up into our community, the main body of the community, to get to the sounder stations, to get to Pierce Transit, to get to the shopping complex, get to the high school, get to City Hall, you know, all the different avenues we'd expect that people want to get to. And so we're moving back up to the north part of the city, and we got the Silicon Boulevard completion. That's completed, and then we complete these 3 pieces here. Then everybody who lives up in this region up here can now get to the same physical features. One piece we haven't talked about real quick here is a little strip from Agate up to Onyx here. That part of Phillips doesn't have any curb gutter sidewalk or bike path. So that's another project that if that was completed with a bike path and at least one side of the road having a sidewalk on it, then anybody who lives up here in the Oak Brook area can now safely get down into the corridor, the Silicon Boulevard corridor, to all the shopping, the schools, doctor's visits, you name it, and then eventually get right into the park. So it completes the system, it completes a loop. So rather than doing a piece here and a piece there and a piece here based on what the funding agencies may want to pursue at that particular year, now we're putting together a package that shows a system that when completed allows people to get around the community more effectively. Hipkins, going back to Hipkins. Hipkins is one of those that yeah, it just needs to be done, but it's an expensive need to be done. And you can see that it doesn't connect the system. If that were to happen later, then probably be looking to do 104th Street and then Butte Drive down here to Vernon. That's another body of work that needs to be done, but we just don't have the funding to do that at this time. There are other projects that we're still waiting on getting grant information on, whether we win it or not. Far West Drive, it's got a stretch in here that we'd like to finish those sidewalks, but we have a grant in right now. That one I think is still in play, as is another proposed project over off of 80th Street by Wards Lake Park. So in a nutshell, what we've tried to do is we've tried to look at the overall connections across the community, how to fill in, excuse me, I went the wrong way on this, how to fill in some of these yellow gaps where we've identified that sidewalk connectivity is needed in the future, and to bring that forward sooner. Without going into each one of the projects, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or we can dive into each one of them.
Mr. Whalen.
Thank you. I appreciate this, Mr. Busich. As you know, we're going to review the non-motorized plan here the next 12 to 18 months and update that. But I want to speak similarly to the comment Mr. Brandstetter made about Mount Tacoma Drive. And part of it is because I'm familiar with it. I drive it every day, and I look at some of these other connectivity things. Here's why I think that project needs to be moved up from tier 2 to tier 1. You know, we've talked a lot about connectivity of neighborhoods to the town center. One of the thoughts we had when we did the TBD, the Transportation Benefit District, was to raise funds for projects that would not otherwise get grant funding with safe routes to schools or otherwise, and to connect neighborhoods to the town center or neighborhoods to parks. We have the Colonial Center that sits out there and has a dearth of connectivity because we haven't done much for it other than in the immediate vicinity. We have the downtown sub-area plan that we've talked at length about in terms of creating connectivity. But if you look at your map, and I look at the neighborhoods on both the west and east side of Lake Steilacoom, there is very little connectivity, if any, into the town center. That particular road, unlike perhaps Phillips Road, has no shoulders that are even of any sort of safe width for anyone south or north of Mount Tacoma Drive to reach the new Colonial Center or to get into downtown safely. We've also talked about Edgewater Park being improved. Now, Waverly, which goes along Edgewater Park at the intersection there of Mount Tacoma Drive, can be safely walked down to the park, but not from Mount Tacoma Drive. So anyone who wants to reach Edgewater Park as we improve it, or the Colonial Center, has to take their life in their hands on the major or minor arterial, however you characterize it, of Mount Tacoma Drive. It's a mess. And I think it needs to be raised up from tier 2 to tier 1 to provide some connectivity for all of those neighbors in those neighborhoods to the town center, Edgewater Park, and elsewise. So I think we need to elevate it.
Mr. Brandstetter.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Busich. I appreciate your explanation and your rationale, and I actually appreciate that it makes sense from an engineer standpoint in terms of looking at systems to be able to go and do that. I just am concerned that it's that the projects are all good projects and are aims to go. I just think that in terms of going to Transportation Benefit District bond funding is at odds with the philosophical goals that the council had when it created a Transportation Benefit District, and what it told the community that a Transportation Benefit District would do for the community, that all of the different programs of transportation funding just could not. Like the deputy mayor, I am concerned that we are a considerable time behind what we had at one time hoped to be updating our non-motorized transportation plan. And non-motorized transportation was one of the things that the Transportation Benefit District was envisioned being able to improve. And as well as the role of the Transportation Benefit District funding in maintaining roads, particularly roads in neighborhoods, to be able to go and do that. So, you know, I think the project list is fine. I might be more supportive of trying to do a levy action to do those major things that are in tier one, while you continuing to look at transportation benefit district dollars going forward. But I think the discussion about the total need of what's needed is a good one, and I appreciate the perspective of completing arterial systems, which needs to be something that the city does, but not the only transportation thing we need to do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
With this share screen up there, it's hard to see. Mr. Bulkey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the first question I'll ask, and I'll leave this for Ms. Kraus or the city manager. When we did the TBD, the discussion centered around the need for pavement preservation and chip sealing, which we've restored. If we bond this, the money for chip sealing and pavement preservation program has to come from somewhere else. So that's either the REIT or the general fund. And before you answer the question, I'll express my concern that the reason we got into the pavement preservation issues we did is a council made a decision to stop chip sealing. And because that chip seal money came out of, I don't know what. And my concern is if it's not coming from a dedicated source anymore, that a future council will do the same. So, and I know we can't bind future councils, but explain to me what your strategy is to keep the pavement preservation and the chip seal program as fully funded as we've been able to do.
So I can take that. So as you said, Councilmember Boki, there are other pots of money. So the general fund has $700,000 annually that is scheduled to be put into the transportation CIP. Other sources also include the motor vehicle excise tax, any excess above and beyond what we've already identified. And those would be primarily, there's a multimodal money that we receive, the increase in gas tax. So there are other pots of money that when we get into the next biennium, they'll be reevaluated.
Okay, great.
Could I just
Thank
add?
you. Yeah.
I would just add, Councilmember Boki, you know, every 2 years, this body develops city council goals in terms of what they want to accomplish. And so long as that you include pavement restoration and a chip seal program as a part of that, it shall get done. As a matter of fact, ever since this body reinstituted those programs a number of years ago now, we have essentially been going gangbusters and making significant improvements throughout the city to a point where our index rating is one of the highest around and only continues to improve. As a matter of fact, there's probably going to come a period of time in the near future where, because of all the road construction that we have done, coupled with all of the chip sealing, that we're probably going to have to go on a bit of a hiatus for chip sealing. That's not to say it won't come back 5 years later or so, but that's the work that's been getting done in the community. But again, so long as this body makes it a priority, it will get funded.
Okay, so I'm gonna, couple other things. So I like the list. I mean, we can continue we clearly have to have some discussions around it. In the packet that we received, the JBLM North project was top of the list. Now it didn't get mentioned tonight, so it's not part of that, which is cool, which frees up another $4.5 million, I guess. So that's how we get to the number to bond? Is that, you feel, between grant money we hope to receive and monies we already have earmarked towards this, that we can pay for that project?
No, Councilmember Boki. So the funding that we have available is not driven by the projects. It's driven by the revenue sources. So the vehicle license fees, by bonding that, generates $11.3 million. Then we have existing, I would define as free cash, between now and the next couple of years, totaling another 2.5 million. So that basically brings us to available funding, presuming you want to bond the vehicle license fees, to about $14.9 million. And so that's your funding source. So from there, you buy that down with the projects. With the phase 2 of the JBLM North Corridor Improvement Project, the 4.2 million is the funding that's left to be found. And so our intent is to, and we feel confident that maybe not this year, but certainly in the next couple of years, because the DCI program did originate out of Lakewood here, and the 10th district with Mr. Heck, that we are somewhat confident that eventually we will receive funding for that. And plus, our request is now lower than it was last year. So we're hoping that goes somewhere. So also, as Mr. Busish pointed out, the projects that we are recommending are ones that highly unlikely we're going to get grants. I would also like to point out that, again, getting back to what we have identified as $15 million in financing. But as Ms. Krause pointed out, there are other options. From a councilmanic standpoint, you could increase the vehicle license fee from $20 to $40, which would provide another 11.3 million. Or you could go from $20 to $30, which would provide another 6.5 or 6 million or so. That's at the councilmanic level. And then if you wanted to go to the vote of the people, you have some options there. Though going to the vote of the people for a capital bond to try and get 60%, that is very, very difficult. However, there are some options with doing a levy lid lift where the approval rating is 50 plus 1%, a simple majority. However, the amount of financing that generated is somewhat limited. So those are some of your financing options that you have before you.
Okay, so I want to ask about the Mount Tacoma project that we've talked about. The project says Mount Tacoma to Interlochen, which is across the bridge, I guess. If we shorten that project, how extensive is that project, and why is it so expensive?
So that's not one of the projects that we've been proposing to fund at this time. So that's on a separate list then that you're looking at? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
Well, there's a couple different reasons that come to mind why that project's expensive. First off is we have a 30-foot right-of-way. That's it. That road, Interlochen, Mount Tacoma, it's concrete. So that concrete all needs to be ripped out. We can't put a new road on top of it. So it all has to be torn out. Very similar to what we had to do out at Veterans Drive. There's some real concern that the road as it currently exists, the windy, twisty road going out to the lake, Interlochen, may not actually be within the right-of-way, fully within the right-of-way. There's some concern about that. 30 feet doesn't really give you much room to put in the 2 lanes, curb, gutter, well, at least 1 sidewalk. You wouldn't get a bike lane in there without acquiring property. There's a lot of utilities in there that don't have any place to move. So we'd have to work around those utilities, power poles in particular. We've got hydrants right up against, well, within a couple of feet of the pavement right now. So when you get right down to it, that's going to require right-of-way acquisition to get us our standard road of 2 12-foot lanes, 2 6-inch curbs for the curb and gutter, and then additional sidewalks. So we need 40 feet minimum. Probably 46 would be better. We don't have it. And knowing the nature of the homes and some of the estates out there, almost, it's going to be extremely challenging to buy that necessary right away and to make a project work out there.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
but
Mr. Bulkey.
But if we scoped it differently to get to Waverly or something like that, like Councilmember Deputy Mayor Whalen mentioned, the cost would drop,
of course,
fairly dramatically. The problem, well, there's problems, but the big problem is that curvy part. Is that
I get calls all the time from people concerned about walking along there and speeding cars, you name it.
Okay. So, yeah, I get what you're trying to do. I have a positive feeling about it. I think we need to probably have more discussions around the project list. I get your argument on Hipkins. Yeah, I mean, I think my initial take on it is positive. I think I look at the 6-year TIP and try to figure out how we can pay for $89 million, but I don't know how.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mr. Branstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for Ms. Kraus. That a 20-year bond issuance, that's 10 bienniums of transportation benefit district revenue. On your list of actions that it would take to do that, I didn't think that I caught where we'd have to do something to extend the life of the district. The district doesn't have 20 years left, does it?
You're muted, Ta.
Sorry about that. If I remember off the top of my head, I believe it expires in 2034. What I don't know is if we have the debt service issued, what that does to the expiration. I would need to look into that and talk to the city attorney on what the process, if any, to extend that.
Actually, it would simply, this body has the ability to change that.
Any other questions? Yes, I'm pretty much where Mr. Bulkey is. I appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into this. I think the analysis is at this point in time, not what was contemplated 5 years ago or whenever. And as we've seen in the last year, things change. Things are always changing. I think we need to make the best decision for the community at this point in time, and that would probably include the further discussion on which one of the good projects are at the top of the list, but these are definitely the good projects. So like Mr. Whalen, I kind of have little bit of prejudice to the ones I drive every day, but I see, you know, what Veterans is. I go out there enough that I see what Veterans has done, and kind of I'm not looking forward to the mess that is going to be entailed, but I think the people of Lakewood have become accustomed to the inconvenience of road construction. It's almost like they live in Minnesota or something, where they have 2 seasons, winter and road construction. And you get a lot more positives than negatives when your road conditions are up. So thanks for all the good work you do there. Anything further?
So Mayor and Council, so next steps. You know, tonight was, you know, kind of just an introduction to the work that we've been doing the last couple of years, both on the financing side and the project side. Also, I'd like to point out that there's a number of projects that were on that larger list that are no longer on that list. So it gets shorter and shorter. But, you know, how would you like to take this on next? Would you like to focus on the amount of revenue available? Or would you like to come back and have a discussion on projects and for us to develop a mechanism for the council to select projects based on what? Preference, individual preference, or, you know, something from an engineering standpoint?
Yes. I haven't heard a groundswell of support for additional revenue at this point.
Okay.
I think the first thing we need to do is say, and I haven't heard any groundswell for eliminating the $20 tab fee that comes to Lakewood. It has been a success. We've seen progress as a direct result, and I think that people of Lakewood appreciate the product, even though if they don't appreciate how much Sound Transit charges them. I think within those means, the next steps would be to have further discussion on which of the top projects from an engineering standpoint we as a council feel complete the loop figuratively and sometimes literally, and see how we want to allocate that $15 million. And then, and probably in my personal opinion, only then, once we've embarked on that, if there are some worthy things that need further assistance, we could have revenue discussions.
Okay. So work off of the 15.
Sound all right with the council? Let's see some head nods. Yeah. So
work off of the 14.9 million. I don't want to overpromise this. There's going to be another 100,000 there. We'll go ahead and do that, and then come back to you. It'll probably take us a little bit to kind of develop a mechanism or a process for the council to prioritize how you would like to prioritize the projects. But we will bring that back in the next month or two.
Okay, Mr. Whalen.
Quick question, Mr. Caulfield. So hypothetically, if some of the federal monies come on the COVID-related stuff that are one-time monies, can any of those potentially be used to supplement our transportation wish list here?
No, Deputy Mayor. The COVID monies can only be used for COVID-19 relief. However, there is a caveat. The caveat is that the COVID-19 monies can be used to reimburse local government agencies for lost revenue. So if you decide to do that, and Ms. Krause is working on that, if you decide to do that, which actually I will be recommending that you do, that will then create an infusion into our general fund, which will then become one-time monies. And then under your financial policies, because they're in the general fund, you would then have the ability to invest those in one-time projects.
Exactly. Okay.
And there's a slight additional thing, although a lot of hoops to jump through if you're using CDBG money, but there is a potential legally, maybe not practically, to supplant some of our CDBG funding with COVID money, depending on the project. If it's going to something that's related, like housing, and then plus up use some of the CDBG money for roads. If they're in the right neighborhood. It's pretty difficult, but it's possible. Mr. Bulkey, then Mr. Ranstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'd like to ask the question when we get these raw numbers, and like I said, I like the tier 1, tier 2 list. What role does the surface water management portion play? Because I know we put those funding in, we've traditionally used them as our match a lot of times when we got grants. We've now bonded some of that stream. Where are we at do we have enough surface water management money to support these projects? And what portion of surface water management pays for these projects?
Defer, Mr. Busich, you want to take that one on? It's usually about 10 or 20% of the project.
Yeah, since it was dealing with numbers, I was waiting for Todd to respond. So it does vary from project. For example, on Silicon Boulevard, one of the projects is building sidewalks. And so we wouldn't pay anything out of the surface water utility for the sidewalks, but there's a small portion of Silicon Boulevard by the hospital we have to realign because there's not enough room to build it between the current curb and the historic wall and the right of way. So it would pay a small amount towards that. Typically, we look in the planning level to anticipate 15% of surface water paying towards the project. On the JBLM Washington Boulevard project, because we're building so much curb and gutter, plus we're completely redoing the infrastructure, the drainage infrastructure, the number is closer to 30%. So it's much higher. I started looking at the projects on this list to see if I could estimate how much we would expect from surface water pay for it. And it does vary from a relatively small amount to upwards of 10 to 15% of the project.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Ranstetter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I agree that the next steps really need to do a reprise of the work that we did 8 years ago to work on a master projects list and prioritize them to be able to go and do that. And Mr. Busich has certainly brought a lot of information that could inform that list. But I think that discussions around that, you know, I don't necessarily want to rush them in the next 2 months. And I would really like them to be informed by also consideration of projects that come out of a revisit of the non-motorized transportation plan before we revise the non-motorized transportation plan after we've planned a 6 or 7 year plan for whatever money we have. And then after we have the project list, I think there still is room for a discussion about whether we want to bond all of the transportation benefit district revenue or whether we want to maintain some of it for use on a pay-as-you-go for maintenance or needs that appear. I think it's something we need to get started on, but not something that we need to artificially put a fast track on.
Anyone else? Mr. Caulfield, anything else from you? Reports by the city manager?
Not in this item.
All right. And we move to reports by the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few things. The first is we continue to track the Congress's COVID-19 emergency aid reconciliation project, or package rather. And So it's moving through the House Budget Committee, and I think I reported last week, it's expected to get over to the Senate here in the near future. And again, their timeline is to try and have something in place by March 14th, which is when federal unemployment benefits run out. So it is moving very, very quickly. Last week, I think it moved through 9 committees in the House. So moved very, very rapidly. And so hopefully by the middle of March, we'll know something one way or the other. Based on the way the bill is written right now, once Congress approves, the money's within about 30 days or so, or even less than that. I think 15 days will be dispersed to the states. The states will then have up to 30 days to distribute to counties and cities. And the caveat is that the state can't place any restrictions or take a piece of, a city's money or anything like that. Their job is to be primarily the fiduciary agency and pass that on to us. And the reason the federal government's doing this is because, there's 52 states or 50 states, 52 states, 52 cards, 50 states. And, but there's over 19,000 cities, towns, and villages, and another 3,500 counties in the United States. So that's why Congress is going to use the states to have the money distributed and have it flowed out to the local agencies. Also, late last week, we were contacted by Senator Murray's office, and I think, as you all know, Senator Murray sits on a number of transportation committees in the Senate, and she has been a huge proponent of a number of transportation packages and during her tenure as a United States Senator, including developing what used to be the Tiger program, now the Build program. And so she has asked a number of agencies, I guess all agencies here in Washington State, to try and get an understanding of what the infrastructure priorities are. So between Friday evening and Monday afternoon, we followed up with her office, both at the local level and in Washington, D.C., on really what that means. Is it a huge, cast a huge net to capture all of our infrastructure needs as it relates to transportation, which would be, for example, $86 million, or are you looking for one or two, or are you looking for something in between? And so really what they're looking for is just some general examples of what the needs are out there. So, and we're on a very, very tight timeline. She wants this information by close of business on Friday, February 26th. And so unless there's any objection from this body, we are going to actually submit 3 funding requests or funding priorities, if you will. The first one, if you go to the tier 1 projects, are projects 1, 2, and 3. So it would be, where are my notes here? It would be the 4.2 million for the JBLM North Access Project, Nyanza, and 112th. And so combining that into some kind of a military package, because it connects from JBLM all the way into the city. And we believe we can, justify that. And that would be adding that up. It's about $11.5 million. The next one would be projects, actually standalone project number 4, which is 100th Avenue, kind of coming into the downtown area. And then the third project would be the 2 Steilacoom Boulevard projects. And so that's kind of what we got right now. Again, she's just looking to get an understanding of what the infrastructure needs are out there. We do understand from her office that this is potentially, they didn't say it, but this is what we're hearing, is that this is potentially the beginning of earmarks coming back. So then we would be invited to submit a specific project for an earmark request, which have not existed since either 2010 or 2011. So that's our understanding. And so in the meantime, we have been asked to, again, just provide some, infrastructure priorities and what our needs are, so she can get an understanding of what the local needs are. So again, unless there's any objection, that's what we'd like to move forward with. And, that's $20 million. That's a That's a large chunk of money. By no means are we going to be, if earmarks do come back, no, I don't see the senator saying, well, you have to choose from that list right there. I don't see that happening. By the way, earmarks in the past have ranged in dollar value from, $500,000 to $1 million, though some good sized infrastructure transportation projects have been $2 to $2.5 million. So that's kind of the range of the funding of where earmarks were in the past. Though again, there is speculation that if they do go back to earmarks, that they might even be larger this time around. But again, pure speculation on my part. And then I think those are really the two items. The third item at the local level, population growth. So I think, as you know, PSRC adopted Vision 2050. And so, the 4 counties are now going through their population updates for 2044. And those of you who were on the council back in 2016 into 2017 will recall hearing a presentation given by Sound Transit outlining, for example, Lakewood's population going to 95,000+ people, and then a number of other cities having these really large numbers. And everybody was curious where those were coming from. And apparently they were coming from PSRC. That in turn generated a joint meeting of this body with University Place about where's this all coming from. And according to PSRC, those were quote unquote planning numbers, and they weren't something that, any of our cities were going to be held to. At that point in time, we decided on our own, and a number of cities have done this as well. We decided to, do an analysis of, okay, where's our population heading? Long story short, as we look out to 2044, based on past population growth coupled with where our zoning and our land use is right now, including having a one sub-area plan in place and another coming up on board, we expect our population to probably grow to about 68,000 people. However, PSRC would like us to take a larger amount. And so we are working with the county as well as some other cities to communicate what our position is on that. The way that the process works is this is actually going to go through PCRC, the Pierce County Regional Council, and I know a couple of members of this body are a part of that. That recommendation will then go to the full Pierce County Council, and then the Pierce County Council will make the decision on what each respective agency's 2044 population growth targets are going to be. But long story short, based on who and what we are, we estimate our population to go to 68,000. I would also like to point out that there are huge swaths of Lakewood that are just, even though we're almost 19 square miles, there's huge swaths of Lakewood that are not going to have growth to accommodate population. For example, we have 4 major state institutions. We have Pierce College, Clover Technical College, we have Western State, and then we have the Wildlife Preserve. Huge areas within our city where you're not going to see housing or development. We also have 5 lakes, and I'm not trying to be funny here, but we have 5 lakes, which take up a considerable amount of our area. And then another area that we're not going to see population increase, we could actually see population decrease. And again, it's not because of the city or the state or the county. It's because of the FAA and DOD, which is in our North Clear Zone and Air Corridor area, which is supposed to have really low density and hardly any population. And that's the whole northeast part of our city. So just wanted to give you kind of a warning order on that at the request of Pierce County, they did request some information. And so we sent a letter over to them on Friday. So that, Mayor, is my report. Thank you.
Questions for the city manager? I understand that the people of the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico are now nominating senators.
So I was right, 52.
Mr.
Anybody
Mayor,
else?
Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Caulfield, when do we expect the results from the census?
Thank you, Councilmember Moss. So it's work in progress, and I actually have a note on that. So by April 30th of this year, the Census Bureau is expected to have population counts that they're going to send out to the states so that they can do the apportionments by legislative district and congressional district and all of that. So basically, hopefully by the end of April, that's what we're looking for.
Thank you. The other question I have is that I know I'm going to get asked the question. There's signs up on Onyx that the road is going to be closed. A section of the road is going to be closed April 27th all day. Do you know what the purpose of that is for?
Not offhand, I don't, Councilmember, but I can find out and get back to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions for Mr. Caulfield? And we have one other item of business before council comments, and hopefully this accompaniment will work for Ms. Moss because I can't sing. Happy birthday
to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you, guys. That was
Happy
wonderful.
birthday.
It has been an interesting day, I must say, but good.
Well, birthday lady, you're first for council comments.
Oh, well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just report that on Thursday, I attempted to join Miss, what's her name? Here, Representative Morgan's town hall meeting, but the link that we had did not take me to where her town hall meeting was. It took me to Olympia, and I got in touch with a lady by the name of Pat. And we had a long conversation. She tried, she couldn't find it. Eventually, 45 minutes later, she called me back. And the reason she was so diligently working to get that information is because that's something she said she needed to know. If they're going to have town hall meetings, they need to make sure that the people that can answer the phones messages have that information. So anyway, just so that I did attempt to join her town hall. And then on Saturday, I did join the town hall meeting with Representative Mary Levitt and Senator Nobles. And there was another gentleman there. That was interesting, but just showing support and that Lakewood is listening and supporting them. So thank you.
Mr. Branstad.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah. I also discovered that Representative Morgan's town hall was canceled. That's as I went through and finally reached someone that they actually canceled that, which was why none of the links were working. And it was interesting when the 28th District Town Hall meeting to hear the range of areas of interest of people from the community that posed questions to those elected officials to be able to go through and do that. And so the meeting was well run, and I think was of benefit to the people that did tune in to look to be able to go and do that. I guess that I would pose a question to the city manager or to Mr. Boki, what's the timeline, and are we on track in the virtual environment for the underclassmen on the youth council to come up with a recommendation to the mayor for a quality community scholarship nominee?
Yes, Councilor.
I don't know anything. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Councilmember Brandstatter, that's work in progress right now, and they expect to have a recommendation here.
Okay, what's the timeline that's required?
I think it's sometime in March, Councilmember.
Okay, well, I do appreciate all the council members that have made a contribution this year to match the Lions Club contribution, and so we are in line to have a $500 scholarship for our nominee that we'll be able to present once we know who it is. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Where do I send money?
Oh, yeah.
You could send it to me, but make it out to the Lakewood First Lions Club so I don't have to launder it in between two accounts.
Okay. All right, Ms. Farmer.
I was out and about early this morning and super excited to see that Burr's was open. So for any of you Burr's aficionados, I had an open sign. That was exciting. Last week I testified on substitute Senate Bill 5163 regarding the treatment and placement of sex offenders once they've done their service and are ready to return to the community. And I'm happy to say that the legislation is still alive and well, even though DSHS put a ginormous fiscal note on it, which we're kind of trying to track down, but at least it's still moving. And Thursday, I attended the General Assembly of the Pierce County Regional Council, and Mayor Penner runs a tight ship. We got done in 50 minutes. It was supposed to be a 2-hour meeting. And I was happy that yet another Zoom meeting got over, in a nice manner. But I did have to remember that a year ago, the PCRC meeting was my very first non-city council meeting as a brand new council member. And it was a wonderful meeting and a chance to talk with other electeds from around Pierce County. And so it was a bittersweet moment. And that's all I have.
Yeah, I got to remember that Josh is a Marine, so he just forges forward. Mr. Bulkey.
I don't have anything, Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Whalen.
Thank you. I too attended the Pierce County Regional Council General Assembly, although for some reason I couldn't get my camera to work, so I was the dark screened one. But
I was wondering where you were. Okay.
Yeah, no, I was there, and I made them sign me in. I talked to Tiffany about that. But prior to that, I attended the 113th Annual Lincoln Day Banquet, again via Zoom. That's the Tacoma Pierce County Bar Association's annual event for those of us attorneys, and got a chance to briefly hear Judge Cuthbertson's comments on race and equity issues in the law, and he's a fantastic speaker and a great man. And so I listened to him for a bit, and then I had to shift over to PCRC. So it was a double whammy event for the evening. And then I just wanted to comment. I appreciate city manager's updates. We got a long list of really good information, but I don't know if some of you like me were curious about the police calls for service and all the good work we do. And yet we seem to have to release folks because for whatever reason, they can't be booked into the county jail due to COVID circumstances. So these suspects who are arrested, we chase down, are released. And so I wonder if it's time for us as a community of electeds to kind of send a letter to the county to say, it's time to do something or think a little differently, because we can't keep doing good police work only to have these people released back into the community to do further actions that require more good police work and resources. I think it's ridiculous. So that was my thank you for the information, Mr. Caulfield, but I think the catch and release is best reserved for fishing and not for criminals. That's my comment.
All right, thanks. One constituent concern to bring up, I hadn't had a chance to talk to the city manager. The intersection of Pack Highway and Gravelly Lake Drive where it T-bones, people are repeatedly going through the fence at the other side, usually to the, what would be the west, excuse me, east and south. So they come out between the two gas stations and don't make the curve, or go out into the intersection and get hit by another car, and there's a collision. And same folks over there have had cars in their backyard like 3 times. First question is that our intersection, or is it still state highway that is coming down there as it was originally state highway? Do we control that intersection? And the second thing is, when I look at our plans for the loop around Gravelly Lake, they don't seem to link up from the entry sign, the Lakewood sign, gateway, to the freeway. And this is in between there. So the request the neighbors are making is for something not maybe as extensive as the area at Gravelly Lake Drive off 112th, where we built the Great Rockery, but something that would block the cars from continuing into their yards.
So Mayor, this is at Gravelly Lake Drive and Pacific Highway, where it comes together as a T.
Correct. And so if somebody's coming off Pack Highway, the two recurring factors seem to be somebody coming off Pack Highway and making a left toward the freeway and not making the turn and going through the fence, or having a collision at that intersection, forcing someone off the road into the fence.
Where the light is. There's a light, there's a controlled intersection.
Correct. And this is actually, it isn't right. It doesn't seem to be right at the intersection. It seems to be, because of the motion of the cars, it seems to be that the bigger problem is toward the freeway, like one over right across from the 76 station.
Okay.
But you'll see there's a hole in the fence there now, and it's a recurring thing. There doesn't seem to be a barrier that's can satisfactorily keep a car out. I don't know if there's any barrier there. It's mainly wood fence. And I'm inviting city council members, because this is a long lead time and COVID's going to be in control. I've decided that I will crash our sister city's annual Bawang Bagak Festival in the Philippines. It's amazing. They've been here a couple of times. I went with a couple other folks from Lakewood and my wife and one daughter, close to about 5 years ago now. And I managed to score, quote unquote, good tickets on miles to get over there. So the city doesn't really have a budget for it, but if you'd like to go to experience great hospitality, good food, and another culture with our sister city folks, it would be nice to see that we could get a group together from the community. A number of people, I know Connie Coleman-Lackady was with us for part of it, as was the Charlene Richardson, the Picardos, have relatives there. In fact, one of them's on the council there now. So there's some, and Oscar Hillman's been there before for the same festival. So it's a really neat experience. And the weather is fairly dry that time of year without hurricanes.
Which time of year is it, Mayor?
New Year's. Their anniversary of the city is the culmination. It's also the 12th day of Christmas, January 5th. And so they have the festival from before Christmas leading up to the kind of the grand finale on the 5th. They're only about 410 years older than we are. Their city was founded like 430 some years ago. Anyway, anything further? Well, thank you all for being here tonight and helping us select a new council member. Always a difficult decision to make, and I would note that we did it. That's quite an achievement. We're adjourned.
I want to say thank you guys for the wonderful singing. Made my day. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Mary.
Thank you.